Greetings, traveler. A traveler named Johan the Gnarler asked recently how I would start in the games industry if I was starting fresh with no contacts whatsoever. His situation is that he's a SWE and a senior ops engineer working in a big company right now. He's having about enough of it with the grind. It's becoming too much for him, and he's thinking, how would he make the jump? How could he take the next steps? That's what applies to his situation, and I want to try to answer today. So what I will do is I will talk about the hard mode of doing this, and then I will talk about how I would make things easy for myself if I really had to do that today, knowing nothing that I know about the games industry that I know already. My name is Xanthos. I have been working in the games industry for 13 years now. I do know a lot of people and a lot of companies in the space, but let's say I knew none of that. Let's say that I was doing some other job and I wanted to switch. What would be my next steps? Let's talk about the hard mode first, which I have done in the past, and indeed it was definitely not the way to go. I would look up some game company on the internet. I would look at their website and see what their mission is, their previous games, and see what sort of roles they're recruiting for. And I would then go and apply to one of those roles and try to see what happens, essentially. Now, this is difficult because I would know very little about the company. I would know almost nothing about what their current situation is, what they're currently working on, what they currently need, what skills they value. I wouldn't know any of that. I would just apply basically blindly, writing all of my experience on the paper, or the form, even if some of it doesn't apply to that position. And if by some miracle I would be called for an interview, I would just talk about whatever the interviewer would want to talk about and basically miss the entire point of the interview. This is not a method that's impossible to succeed. In fact, most people are using this method to apply to jobs, but in my experience, there's a way easier way to do these things. I don't know how much this applies to other industries, but in my experience, it works amazing miracles for the games industry, and it's what has enabled me to find exactly the work I wanted and move to positions that are closer and closer to what I had in mind in my experience. So let's go and look at that. So if we're looking at this situation, when we're getting ready, or if I was getting ready to start looking for positions in the games industry, this is what I would do. I would want to know two things. One, what positions are there? So I would want to know, when you make a game, how do you make it? What components are necessary and who makes each component? Every game has a slightly different structure. Some games need more art or more networking or servers or clients or specific game design, riddle knowledge, puzzle knowledge. There's all sorts of games out there. So I would want to know what sort of companies there are out there, what kind of games they're working for, they're making, and learn a little bit about how they're making them. So the structure of the team and what components are necessary and who's making each one of these components. Then the other very important thing I would want to know is what is involved. In each role. So after I know that, for example, you need a game designer who is good with level design, for example, among all the other specialties that are necessary, what does that person do? What are their responsibilities? What is the day-to-day tasks? What background experience is good? What academic background is necessary, if anything applies? I would want to know these things so I can plan ahead about how to present myself during the conversations I have with that company and during the interviews. So for me, these are the most important questions. So how can we answer them before we get to the interview stage? And trust me, with what I'm going to show you, by the time you get to the interview stage, the interview itself will be completely meaningless. There's way more important things to talk about. So let's just jump in. First, for what positions? Now, I know this is not available in every country, and in every country this takes a slightly different form, but a great source of information for this is recruiters or HR people, if you can see. So recruiters and HR are, I think, the best source of information about this to give you a broad, very broad perspective of everything that is out there. Of course, every person will have different information because they get exposed to a different part of the industry, but especially with recruiters, especially with my experience here in Japan, is that because their job is to place many candidates in many companies, even within their niche, they see a lot of different people, they talk to a lot of different companies every single day, they see how they evolve over time, they see what they're looking for, what the struggles of the companies are, so what game they want to make, what skills they're lacking, what people are missing, what they're trying to find, what's missing for these companies to complete their products or to complete their teams and so on. So they get to hear that information from several companies every single day. So if you want the high-level view of what's going on in an industry right now, what are trends, what are missing skills and so on, this is a good place to start. Of course, it's not going to be all the information there is out there, and of course each person only knows what they're exposed to, but you'll be surprised at how much you can learn from people like that with I don't know, 10, 20, 30-minute conversation. Very, very valuable in my experience. HR, people who work in HR departments of companies are also similar in this respect, because even though they just work in one company and they're typically exposed only to the workings of that one company, they have worked before in other similar companies before moving to their current role. So they have seen at least a few companies out there and their whole job is to talk to candidates, talk to recruiters in many cases, and get information from them. So what most candidates are looking for, what was their experience applying for that company, what skills were necessary, what skills were good, and so on. When HR people are talking to recruiters, they often get an image of the situation in the market. So for example, they're looking for, server engineers, specifically for games, specifically for XY technology. Then they can get information about how many of these people there are in the market right now, what their average compensation is, what their average skills are, how difficult it is to find them, what their requirements are, and so on. This is the day-to-day conversations that many HR professionals get to do. So getting to pick their brain about what they have experienced is also hugely valuable if you know absolutely nothing and you want to get a high-level idea about this. So with these two, with the recruiters and the HR, you can get a general idea about what's going on in an industry, what companies there are out there, what the big players are, and what they're looking for. And that will, of course, inform your next questions, and then you can go and talk to more people like that and get an even clearer image. So this is a great start. Now, what do you do when you have that? When you know what companies there are out there and like what they're doing and what they're looking for, what do you do then? Then I would want to know from all the companies I discovered through this process, which ones are the ones that I'm interested in. So which ones are most closely aligned with what I want to be doing in the future. So this is very important because alignment is such a key and misunderstood aspect of the whole job search culture, I suppose, because you might have a skill and position match in a future job, but if you're not working on the things you want to be working, or there's a difference in direction between the company you're working for and what you do in your day-to-day, then that's not going to work out in the long run because basically you two want different things. So maybe the company has a focus on pumping out as much content as possible, Perhaps you want to focus on quality rather than quantity, things like that. Small things, but still very, very important when it comes to the fulfillment of our work. So how can we learn more about specific companies? How can we learn more about what is actually necessary to work in a very, very specific position in a company that hopefully I have selected and I like for my own personal reasons? And what is the day-to-day we can expect from a position like that, assuming we know nothing about the position and we're just hearing it now for the very, very first time? In this case, we want to know what is involved, right? And here we can ask games industry pros, professionals. Who are these people? These people are people who are already working at game companies right now, and they have front lines experience about what's going on in each specific company and what they're working on, what their day looks like, what their tasks are, what their challenges are, and so on. And here you might be wondering, okay, this is nice, but where do I find all these people? They're working every day, right? Why would they talk to me? Excellent question. People like that, not all of them, just a few of them in my experience, but still a pretty huge crowd, typically get involved with game industry events. And those can be customer-facing events, so player-facing events like the Tokyo Game Show, E3, Gamescom, PAX, many game events like that, where they're typically open to the public. People who are not game industry professionals, so typically players, get to go there and discover the new games and try them out and so on. In these events, somebody has to show off the game of each company. Somebody has to be there at the booth to show how the game works and what the features are and so on. Typically, people who are in the booths either work at the company of the game or have a very close connection with the company of the game. And even if they don't, even if they're just temporary staff hired just for this role, they at the very least can tell you who hired them, who to talk to, who can you talk to for more information, all that stuff. So this is a source to find people who are actively working on the game. And once you have some leads for people to talk to like that, then you can ask them more questions. So again, this is stepping into the interhuman relationships. So anything that would apply when you're talking to a new person, of course, applies to this situation. Perhaps they're busy, perhaps they don't know the information you want, perhaps they're not interested in helping at this moment. All this is completely fine, because for every person that cannot answer the questions that you have at this moment, there's many other people who are very happy to talk about their job and games. The games industry is luckily full of passionate people about games. So many people will be happy to answer these questions. So of course, if you find a person like that, be sensitive with their time, be sensitive with their needs and their environment. Do try to ask them when is a good time to get a coffee or something, or exchange contact information and perhaps set up time to talk later. But in my experience, people who work on games are super excited about them and they would love to tell you more about it. So events like that are one source, but there's also game industry events that are specifically for professionals. So these events can be SIGGRAPH, SEDEC, GDC, events that are specifically for game industry professionals. And here you might be thinking, well, if I'm not a game industry professional, how could I possibly participate in such an event? Many of the events that are for professionals don't have such strict rules about participation. So typically, if you're working anywhere in a similar field, design, programming, sound, entertainment, very broadly, very broad working fields like that are adjacent to the games industry. So even if under the premise of, I'm thinking of getting a job in the games industry, which is true in this case, typically you would have no problem participating in these events. But again, if there's one event that has very strict rules, you can be assured that there's many out there that are very relaxed and you can join. So in these events, which are more networking focused rather than we have a booth and we're showing our things to people, are even easier to talk to professionals too, because there you're almost expected to talk about their companies, what opportunities they have, what the work is like, and so on. And whether it's meeting someone at an event like E3 and talking to them later, or going to a games industry specific networking event, you want to eventually get closer and closer to the kind of company that you're interested in, that works on the kind of project that you are interested in, and then find as much as possible about the day-to-day work and tasks and experience. So here, when you know what the day-to-day experience is and what the project is, then you can already make a judgment for yourself if this is what you want, if this is indeed what you had in mind when you started your search, and if, let's say, you would get a job in that field, this would be satisfying to you. And then you can get actual information from actual people, of course, NDAs being upheld and all that, about what is the work like? What do you do every day in general terms? Do you code sound sub-modules? Do you design levels? Do you draw characters? What are you expected to do in the day-to-day in that job? There you can ask the information and get very specific answers about what to expect when you're working there day-to-day. And for this one, you can go as deep as you like, right? You can ask questions to the people who are actually doing the job, or perhaps if it's not the person who is doing the job you hope to be doing in the future, they are very likely to be able to introduce someone who actually does it, or someone who can give you information about it. So a manager or an HR person in that specific company, or a person in the front lines actually doing the job you want to do. These are all very good people to get real information about what it's like. And once you've made it all the way here, then the only next logical step is to talk about, well, if you wanted to join that company, who would you talk to? And here, traveler is the key. Once you've done all this process and you've learned all the information about what the company does and what the company needs, then you have all the information about how to form your CV in the best way possible to show that you would indeed be a good fit for the job. And to really supercharge this technique, when you ask, okay, if I wanted to apply to this role, who should I talk to? Then you get to talk to a specific person rather than applying through a website or going in blind essentially. So they will say, oh yeah, talk to Steve in HR and Steve will set you up. Having that introduction is putting this technique really on steroids. You know who to talk to, you talk to specific people, you know what you have what the content of the job is, and you can apply for it so much better. Moreover, if you have already talked to one of your theoretical future teammates, then they get to talk internally about you and say, hey, I met a guy who can do so and so, perhaps he can help us with this part of the project. Having that internal introduction, so to speak, is insanely powerful. This is so much more powerful than just reading a CV that a person sent in and trying to decide in a 30 or 60 minute interview if that person is a good fit. In my experience, it can also happen that before you get to have the interview, you can ask for just a quick chat with the HR person, quick chat with the hiring manager or whoever is doing the job, just to find out a few more things about the position, nothing serious, just lighthearted. You can, again, buy them a coffee or whatever you feel is appropriate. And in that casual chat, you can talk specifically about actually important things, i.e., what is the job about, what is required, and how your background can help in solving the problems and the challenges that position typically faces. When that team gets exposed to the information and they already know what your strengths are and how you could solve the problems of the team, and they already like you in a normal interpersonal level, then you have already completed the interview's objective without ever having a formal interview. So if you do get to have an interview after this, perhaps you can talk to a new person, or talk a little bit about your experience, but basically you have convinced everybody you need to convince that this would be a good match for you and for the company. And most importantly, you get to know if all of this is a good match for you before you get to even apply for the job. So first you ask these questions, you find out if this would be a good place to work for, you know what skills they want, you can present yourself to highlight that, oh, you want someone who can code in so and so, I have experience in so and so. So that is exactly the perfect environment to answer these questions. And when these questions are answered in interviews, they're usually very vague. Interviewers ask, tell us your experience with, so and so. And if they don't like your answer, they already internally think, okay, this is not the right person, and they skip to the next question. And before you know it, the interview is over, and they say, oh, unfortunately, this wasn't a good match. And you're like, you didn't even ask me about the important stuff. So this is when you get to have the important stuff conversation. So in my experience, this is extremely powerful. So just to recap quickly, because we went through a lot of tactical advice about this. If I was to start with knowing nobody in the games industry, I would want to know what roles are there out there, what companies there are out there, what do they do. This is good information to find out from recruiters and HR. You can approach recruiters because naturally they want to talk to new people. You can say, I'm interested in applying. Could we have a 5-minute chat and so on? Recruiters love to do these things. It's their job. It's very easy to talk to them. And then you would want to know, okay, I think the company or the 2 or 3 companies that I'm interested in, I want to know specifically if they're doing what I want to be doing. Game events like E3, Gamescom, Tokyo Game Show, where industry professionals are present, or game industry professional specific events like GDC or SEDEC and so on, are very, very good events to specifically talk to people like that. And then you can ask specific questions about the role. And then you can know what to expect, what you need to show off in your skill set, and hopefully convince them through just your natural conversation that you're a good fit before you even ever have to get the interview. So here you go. This is my my plan for what I would do if I were to start over again. Before I finish this video, let me share with you a very simple fact that I heard at a recruiter event a couple of years ago. It was a recruiter event where people from that recruitment company would share some stats about their success and so on that year. And they said, this year we placed so many candidates and we found jobs for so many people and so on. And they were boasting about their stats. And they finished that speech by saying, however, with all those people we placed, still 80% of people who find a job or who switch from one company to the other in the games industry do so through friend introductions. So that is to say that even if you have a super powerful recruiter or your CV looks perfect, still having that personal connection with people working at the company already is the most powerful thing you can do. And if you don't have actual friends in the company you want to work with, then you can create them through the process we just talked about. When you talk to professionals like that, perhaps you can invite them for going for bowling or darts or pool or playing some video game together if you happen to have the same taste. So you can even create friends in this process, and they can hopefully recommend you to their company in the future. So there you have it. I hope this helps someone out there. Thank you so much for your time. And as always, have fun.